Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to In the Cut. We're here on another episode with Alexa Joy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Usually we talk to musicians and people involved in music, but I thought what better way to get away from all that than to talk to you. You do the show on CBC called Uncensored,
I
and
do.
you know that is one of our favorite words to kind of get us to
Mm,
BET caught us with that back in the day with that College Hill Uncensored. So you're
that's
taking
right.
a very different look at it. Tell us about how that show came together and what was the impetus behind starting that.
Sure. So basically, 2020 happened, the pandemic hit. And so I was an organizer back in Winnipeg. And I did a lot of work around just educating Manitobans that first, Black people exist on the prairies. And second, that anti-Black racism also exists on the prairies. There's no border when it comes to the practice or politics of white supremacy. And, Manitoba is a very small province. I think the city's population is just under 1 million. And I grew up in a very white space, obviously, like most Black Canadians, different parts where you grow up, very white. So anyways, I had from my undergraduate years to, I guess, yeah, most of my undergrad and then kind of leaving school, I was really interrogating this idea of how do we do better for Black people in Winnipeg and across the prairies. And I started an organization called Black Space Winnipeg that led into other initiatives, from doing a Black artist showcase to developing the first Black film festival in the prairies, the Afro Prairie Film Festival. And now I'm doing my master's at the New School in New York in sociology, because I'm not done, I think, researching and asking these questions of how to really challenge anti-Blackness on a systemic level. But last year, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, all of our lives changed incredibly from COVID. But I was really burnt out from activism. I've suffered definitely from activist burnout, activist trauma, and I needed to take a step back. So I ended up leaving Winnipeg to pursue work in school. And May, I think it was May 25th, something like some date like this. And I get a phone call from CBC, because I always did work or did interviews with CBC Manitoba, and I get a phone call from them, and I was like, hello, like, hi, Alexa. We were wondering if we could get your reactions on what's happening in the States with George Floyd. And this was I wasn't even on the internet. I didn't know George Floyd, his death happened. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they woke me up at 7 a.m. just what, ambushed me. I'm like, what's going on? And then they sent me a link, and then I saw the video and everything. And uh, I don't know, reporters, they want to get an emotional reaction from you sometimes. So I wasn't prepared, or I told them, I think I told them I can't answer this, right now. So I had to process it. And then all of a sudden, like the organization I was running at the time was getting all these messages and influx of information. I'm just like, what is happening? And I didn't realize how big, his story and his murder got, and it traveled. And then obviously within the coming days, Regis Paquette happened as well. And, there was just this different type of awareness that happened, because I've been doing BLM organizing in Manitoba for a while, And like a lot of the student activism that came around in like 2014, 15, 16 that I was a part of, and BLM Toronto, like really were pushing this battle, like, 4 or 5 years ago. So to see this kind of resurgence, I was like, what is going on? And at this point, I was kind of like burnt out. So I'm like, I don't, it's exhausting to talk and to see, Black death. It's not good for our psyche. We can't see these images and hear these stories, and whether it's in Toronto or Texas or wherever it is in the world, it's crippling on our psyche and our self-care. So I had to process all of this. But then this really interesting thing happened in Canada where I call it the summer of white guilt. It was just like white people throwing money and job opportunities. And they're like, oh my God, please don't compare us to the States. Please don't see how racist we are. Here's a foot in the door. Here's a seat at the table. Here's a freelance contract. You know what I mean? And I'm going to be very honest. If George Floyd had not been killed in front of the world to see, CBC Uncensored would not be a thing. Within George Floyd alone, that month, June was just exhausting. I don't even remember June. Like, I think I blocked out May and June because it was just exhausting. And then they asked me, because I was an activist back home, they asked me if I could do like a CBC event. And I was like, sure, like that's fine. But again, I wasn't as like, I was still struggling with activist burnout. So I was trying to find my passion again. And I always like ride for my community and passion. I will do whatever it takes, my part in the movement to contribute as much as I can. But, I gave a lot of myself, in my early 20s too. Like I'm still relatively young, and I got so jaded and cynical so early. So maybe I should have like slowed down a bit. But that's kind of how Uncensored happens. It was like this Canadian guilt that was just like overwhelming. And I'm not confident if that wouldn't have happened last year, we would have seen certain things now. Like speaking for myself, apart from Uncensored, there's a whole bunch of different opportunities that just kind of open up. And I'm not saying we have not worked for those opportunities or those doors to be open. I'm just saying I think they would have stayed shut a little longer if that didn't happen,
For sure. And I was happy to see when that happened, that we had people of color who were, equipped, capable, and ready for those opportunities, because, it's a different story when those opportunities open up, no matter how it happens, and you get the wrong person in that spot. And there's not as many capable people. So I felt kind of proud of us in that sense, that we have all these good people that, listen, if this is what it takes for you to open the door, that's fine, but we're gonna take the opportunity and run with it. I did a piece last summer, I think maybe in that May, June area, about what was going on. And in my script, I had written a lot of times racism instead of anti-Black racism. So big shout out to Kalisa for pointing that out. But even in myself, I was like, racism, just the words racism on its own is like kind of a benchmark enough for me, when this is different. This is actually against us. This is actually anti-Black racism, which is not the same. Can you talk about kind of distinguishing the difference in between those? Because I think that this summer was the first time last summer was the first time that as a collective, everyone kind of understood the difference.
Yeah, I think that's what was so alarming about, George Floyd's murder, was that you couldn't deny the fact. Like with other videos, when people started recording and you saw half of the situation, and regardless if they saw beginning to end, there was an injustice and a murder that happened, an assault, a serious violation. But with George Floyd, I think that was such a shock, because it was like in front of, it was like, I call it a public lynching. Like it was in front of people. And I think that shock forced people to open their eyes in a way maybe that they haven't before. But again, it's hard to speak about it because I'm still skeptical. Like a lot of the rallies that happened across the country, from what I've seen and heard, like a lot of non-Black folks just came out because, for one, they were cooped up in a pandemic. They were looking for something to do. They left, they took their Black Lives Matter sign, and like, okay, yes, Black Lives Matter. And like, not even centralizing it to Black people who have been wronged or assaulted or ignored or abused in their own cities, like whether we're talking about Calgary or Vancouver, Winnipeg, or Toronto. I'm very disappointed and just numb to how Canadians are so superior, when it comes to anti-Blackness. Like, oh, we can see this happens in the States, or when they always say it's not as bad, right? It's always this narrative where, well, we're bad, but we're not like that. And violence is violence, and doesn't matter what scale it's on. But I think in specifically anti-Black racism, it got a different type of light this year in a Canadian discourse. And if we didn't, but that's not to say, because the first episode we had Sandy Hudson and Sandy Dang on, and Sandy, I liked what she said. She's like, things seem trending in this moment right now, but that's like, they capture one moment of like years of hard work, like climbing up this mountain, and it doesn't stop. The cameras will be gone and we'll still be organizing, we'll still be thinking about ways to challenge the system. But I think, yeah, if it wasn't for such a shocking image to really wake people up. But again, look, they opened their eyes, and I think a lot, chose to close them again, because we're exhausted as Black folks. So if non-Black people, they can't even, I don't think, begin to imagine what it's like to walk in our shoes, to be in our experience. They can't do it. So their attention span isn't gonna last that long, I think.
I think you brought up a good point talking about the burnout, because even in what we're saying, it's like, yeah, in the moment, you're there, you're with us, but as time goes on, things will, kind of revert back to the mean. And
that's right.
We're having burnout from having to keep alerting you of what's going on. And I think what we're on the same page, hoping for, is that there's a time when we don't have to scream at the top of our lungs for y'all to understand and for things to be a certain way. Because the way how, and this is the part that's crazy, is that there was a group of people who had burnout from seeing this on social media and seeing this on the news. And It's like, this is, you're burnt out from 3 weeks. Like,
yeah, welcome to our lives.
I'm like, 3 weeks and you're burnt out, eh? And you wonder, so
exactly.
It's like that goes both ways, and we want to get to a point where it's like it can just be something that, and I think the positive I have seen with some people where I feel like they can't go back, and I use like 2 things to kind of illustrate this. Is one, the term retarded, which we basically don't use anymore, and the way people have public homophobia, the way they speak, like those things are just not, both things are just not acceptable in the workplace at all. And you would think I wanted to add like anti-Blackness to that, because it's clear that people are able to change behavior, and those are 2 clear examples. So if we can add anti-Blackness to that group, we're in a really, really good spot. I want to talk about the Regis Paquette video, because that was one of the ones where I think I saw that so early, and just in the mind space I was when everything happened with George Floyd, I didn't have confidence that it would become what it became, that it would get kind of the news coverage it did, because we've seen so many times it's like 36 hours on it, on Twitter, and then that's the end of it. And this happened in Toronto as well, where we know how that goes, and kind of covering those things. Were you kind of pleasantly surprised, I guess, that this got the coverage, even though it wasn't treated, the actual situation wasn't treated the way we wanted it to be treated? But there's been so many things undercovered in terms of police violence in this country. So for that sake, were you kind of happy that it got more kind of eyes to it?
In terms of Regis's story? Yeah, I think actually we touched on this on Uncensored too. It didn't get as much awareness as George Floyd. George Floyd's
Oh,
definitely overpowered. It was a global reaction, you know. I think that helped centralize the conversation of police violence and state violence in Canada with Regis's story. And, you know, but I don't, am I, I'm glad. I think there could still be, I think there could be more done. Like there are people who have died, who have been murdered at the hands of Canadian police that we still don't know, assaulted, violated. And I think that has a lot to do with this branding that Canada is setting up for itself, that we're inclusive and diverse and tolerant, that we're not as bad, that we're open to all, that we're immigrant friendly. You know, we have Viola on the $10 bill. We've made it, we're on currency.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but to answer, I think there will always be more to do. And Canada can get away with so much because, you know, when you choose to ignore something, you know, that silence kind of gives power to those who report or choose not to report. Like, for example, George Floyd made a massive spread, right? And from the Maritimes to the West Coast. And I tried to centralize it back home in Winnipeg, where there was a South Sudanese man who was shot and killed in his own apartment by Winnipeg police, wow. Machar Madut. And we had an event, Sandy Dang put together an awareness campaign and events last, oh my God, 29, it's not, I can't say last year anymore, it's 2021, oh my God. In 2019, because he was killed in February 2019. And there wasn't like even 1,000 people who showed up to that. But George Floyd, you know, and media and this big splash, 20,000 people, 20,000 plus people come to the Manitoba Legislative Building. And that's exactly what Canada is, that ignorance. Like
Canada is.
There's someone who lost their life at the hands of police in your own city, and you chose not to, you know about that. Even CBC did the pathetic job of covering this man's life and have still yet to seek justice. So that's why I'm always so skeptical of any type of you know, stories in a Canadian context, because it's like there for 1 second and, you know, well, let's focus on the States again, because that's where the real problems are.
Yeah. And it is an attitude that like we are above racism. I know y'all talked about this on Uncensored as well, but one of the main reasons why I wanted to top it up, because, you know, Manitoba is one of the few provinces I haven't been to, but in Toronto, it's very multicultural, and that kind of has the guise of that things are better here, and it's not because Toronto is so multicultural, and that multiculturalism is real, but that doesn't kind of, you know, it skews the anti-Black racism that happens. But describe to me kind of what it is like in Manitoba and Winnipeg, where, you know, it's not as multicultural at all. It's very kind of homogenous.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten much more diverse over the years. Like my family, my mom's side, they did the Jamaica, England, Canada migration in the 60s. And then, yeah, and then like a lot of West African folks came in around like the same 70s, 80s. And then really like the East African community too within like the early 2000s. So it's grown for sure. Like there's a lot of international students, you know, families that have been there from time. And I think I remember the statistics a few years ago, like Black folks are about 4% of Manitoba's population. But again, I think the stats are still 80% of Canada's Black population lives in Ontario. So yeah, there's like, everyone always goes to Toronto, Ontario to, you know, kind of spread their wings, find community. But I think it's a matter of, there's this real isolation when you're Black in the prairies. There's this type of almost longing for community. Like, yeah, you can be raised in like Black spaces, but at the end of the day, sometimes it was really hard to, at least I found, build community like outside of a like culturally diverse you know experience. Like we have this thing called Folklorama, where it's this festival where you go celebrate everyone's culture for
Mhm.
like 2 weeks. And there's like different pavilions you can go and basically see different cultures around the world. And I know there were different initiatives in Winnipeg to try to celebrate Black culture, but because there is this illusion that everything's fine here,
Mhm.
they can get away with, not addressing these real embedded systemic issues. So I think in terms of diversity, the Black population growing, it is, but in my experience, it's been hard to like kind of make community because everyone's like so we're very separated. Like there's different communities in Winnipeg, but there's not like one place where it's like this is where all the Black people, like Ajax or Scarborough, you know what I mean? It's like everyone's in different suburbs. You can see one Black family in a community of like 100 people. So it's hard in that sense, but I think it's getting um better. I do. There's more initiatives happening. There's people opening up and starting their own businesses. um there's a need. Just I think it's going to take time to grow.
Mhm. I think that's kind of a great sentence to say, like, for all of this, it will take time to grow for sure.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about how excited, and that's a crazy word to use, excited last summer to like be a part of what's going on in protest or post or
Mhm.
whatever it was. And I think about now, this is, we're getting closer around the time where it's been a year since we've been in lockdown, and
Yeah.
how the attitudes have changed. I see a lot more people still having some of that energy, but it at all is not the same.
Mm.
For someone like me who's kind of skeptical, and it sounds like you're skeptical as well, like, is there something that you can look to kind of feel confident? Because I want to have something that I can point to say, okay, I feel confident
Mm.
that attitudes are changing. But I feel like, especially in Canada, there's always been that facade. There's always been that kind of front-facing way of behaving and talking about race. So
Mhm.
that like that doesn't make me feel any better. So do you feel like there's something that we can kind of look to that we can feel confident that things have actually changed? Because I feel like a lot of people is not really with us like that.
That's a good point. I mean, I think this is how I can answer this. um Whatever you're looking forward to, just focus on yourself and your work.
Mhm.
I really gave myself to my community and to the movement, and that I was vulnerable. I gave too much of myself for like over 5 years. It's a lot. Um, and now I kind of, my activist hat is kind of hung up, but you'll, I don't know, it never goes away. You'll always want to do something.
Mhm.
So I've kind of channeled the way I have hope now. I've channeled my activism. Let's say less of being on the front lines, whatever that entails, whether it's protests or demonstrations or what I
Mhm.
used to do. And I needed to elevate it. That's why I went to grad school and, started to do work with CBC, because when we institutionalize our ideas and our work, it does have a different lifespan. Even the organization I started, I haven't, I can't remember the last time I actually dedicated any of my time to that, because it's not sustainable.
Mhm.
To do something grassroots, nonprofit, not government funded, can only go so far, especially when, sometimes activists too, we work in silos and we work in isolation, because we're so dedicated to the end goal. But I'd say my activism has elevated to a sense where I want to publish research. I'd like to do more projects where we're really highlighting what's happening in Canada, especially in even more regionally isolated communities like in the prairies. And I think it's imperative that you focus on what your goals are, because that'll always contribute to the movement, you know, whether you're whatever profession you're in, you know, your contributions are crucial for kind of pushing this needle forward, I think.
Oh, that was a good one. That could have been your Wednesday wisdom. That was
Okay, there
that
we
was
go.
that was a good one. This is one that we ask everyone on the show, and when I saw this, I felt like it was a great question to put in here. When people get a lot of money, they buy all type of exotic animals. There's Mike Tyson with his tiger, Justin
Yeah.
Bieber with his monkey. That's just the way it goes. You get $100 million. That's what you got to do with it. If you get $100 million, is there an animal that you would bring into your life?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh my gosh. Um, I wouldn't mind having a parrot.
Okay.
I don't like, I'm a beatboxer, so if I could teach the parrot how to beatbox, that would be fantastic.
That would be hard. That
I've
would be
always
hard.
I've always wanted to do that. Yeah, I think a parrot might be a lot of fun.
That would be hard. I just thought of it and I was like, that would be hard.
I've seen parrots, they live for a long time and you can teach them a lot. They listen, they repeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That might be one of the best answers we've ever had for that one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
For sure.
They say the top 5 people in your life best represent who you are and help you be yourself. So who are the top 5 people in your life to help you be yourself?
Wow.
Now your top 5 doesn't have to be 5. It can be a 2 or it could be a
Okay.
10. But
Okay.
who are the people in your life that kind of help you be yourself?
Oh my gosh. Okay, my mom and sister for sure.
Okay.
You know, something I'm very passionate about is really um, helping Black women fulfill and achieve our fullest potential. Because throughout my activism and community work, I've just seen like almost a lack of confidence sometimes that
Mm.
Black women struggle with that should not be there, but is because of, you know, the world and the society we live in. So my mom, she's a big reason why I do the work that I do, whether she knows about it or not. Like her guidance and patience and love has really been a part of like my fabric of my identity, my makeup. So yeah, I'm sure you've heard that everyone says their mom because, you know, they're
That
the glue. They're the people
that
who
that's
hold
my
everything
that's my answer
together.
too. That's
That's
my answer
right.
too.
And they deserve way more. Black women will always deserve more than how we treat them, how the world treats them. And my sister, it's interesting because we had a bit of a different realities. I grew up with my mom. My parents are divorced, so I grew up with on my mom's side more, and she grew up more around my dad's side of the family. But she's taught me a lot in terms of like independence and like financial literacy and just making sure you have all your shit together, you know, like so professionally and financially, like you're sound. So those two, my mom, my sister for sure. My cousin, who's crazy and just like gets me, and I love her to death, who's basically like another sister. And I think a combination of like friends and mentors throughout the years. I'm really happy that I'm at the new school right now because I don't think a Canadian education could have given me what I needed in terms of developing an arsenal of knowledge for challenging structural white supremacy. I applied to like 4 different schools in Canada, and I don't think they were interested in my research because it was very abrupt. I'm like, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to do research and challenge structural white supremacy. I'm like, okay, well, thank you so much for applying. You know what I mean? And I'm sure, like, I'm sure it was more than that. Like, I know there's different levels of bureaucracy there, but I'm really happy. I feel very supported in my academics right now, and that's something I didn't have. I'm trying not to like paint a bad image of Canada in my mind, but I just feel very jaded in this country, like on a systemic level. Obviously, like different Black folks I've met throughout they're part of my community, but Canada as a whole has a lot of work to do. And not to say America doesn't. Like, I know they're just as fucked up. I'm just saying, like, the mentalities and the different resources that are out there are it's like on another level, which I really appreciate. Sure. So yeah, my academic mentors and just like friends and even exes I've had throughout my life. Anyone who comes into your life teaches you something, I think, about yourself. And even if they're not there the whole time, you know, you're supposed to, what do they say? People come into your life and leave an impression on you, and you learn and you grow and you move on.
You definitely are the first person to ever include exes in their top 5.
Yeah, for sure.
So no, you're definitely killing this part of the question period. For sure.
I don't like to leave on bad notes with people, you know.
No, me neither. For sure. Yeah, big shout out to all the exes worldwide.
Yeah, shout out to all the exes. You've taught your ex a lot, and vice versa.
Oh my god! If your ex is a king right now, you could take some credit.
There you go.
This is the moment you've been waiting for. Wednesday Wisdom. We do a segment called Wednesday Wisdom on the show with our boy Brandon Gibbs. Every single week, he has a new quote or motivational segment that he kind of explains for us, goes into depth more into it. Is there anything that you say to yourself or to others that keeps you motivated? You're feeling a little low.
I do. I've tried to meditate more because my mom's really into meditation. She's like, Alexa, you need to meditate. I'm like, yes, you're right. So I try to meditate, and every night I do write in my journal. I make that as a part of my self-care practice. But I think one of the biggest things I remind myself of is that, you know, I've done everything I could with the time and energy that I had. That's something I say to myself a lot, and to remind myself that there will always be work to do. You can take a break. There'll always be something to do. And I have to remind myself, because of what I learned throughout my activism. You have to, if you're not your number one priority in investing in yourself, you're not going to be good to anyone else. And it's self-preservation, you know, be selfish with yourself, you know. And especially as Black people, we give too much of ourselves to everything, everyone, outside, inside our community. And you need to, that's true. They say racism lowers your life expectancy. It's statistically proven. So we're already fighting against that. You really need to prioritize your health and every sense of the word: physical, mental, sexual, everything. If you're not good, you're not good to others.
That's a good one. If you're not good, you're not good to others. You know what? You were a little worried about Wednesday Wisdom, but I say you did better than good. So you had absolutely nothing to worry about. I think that was an incredible way to end off. Thank you again for joining us. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
No, the pleasure is all mine. For anyone who's listening for the first time to the In the Cup podcast, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you leave us a rating and a review, 5 stars, not a single star less. And of course, subscribe on YouTube as well. The Cool Table Live on YouTube. We got new episodes coming for you every single Friday. But until next time, know yourself, know your worth.
Ooh, I like that. Know yourself, know your worth. That's a good one too.